4 o'clock, I'll call the meeting to order, and the first item of business is adoption of the agenda, moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that the agenda be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with the agenda? Not seeing any. If you guys are okay with it, we're going to hop around a little bit to get a few things done for people's, for staff's time and convenience. So we'll jump straight to 8.6A after declaration of pecuniary interest and everything, minutes. Jump straight to 8.6A from bylaw, then 8.6C, which is a staff summary of the Embro Dam, and then to the Upper Thames delegation, if you guys are all agreeable. Okay. So then, moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that the agenda be adopted as printed and circulated. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Not seeing any. Minutes. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that the minutes from the December 7th, 2022 council meeting be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with those minutes? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And then we will jump down to 8.6A, Corporate Services Department, Report 2022-212 from the Bylaw Enforcement Officer, the new Bylaw Enforcement Officer, Dave Robertson, and the monthly update. Do you want to do any more intro on that?
Great. So Dave started with us a couple weeks ago, and we're throwing him right into a council meeting. So I'll let Dave do a quick little intro and then review his report.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Robertson, and yes, I have started, been here, 2.5 weeks now, I think, and it's been wonderful so far. I've been welcomed and everything. Just a quick little history of my background. I've retired. I had 32 years of policing experience, so now I've moved into the bylaw world, and I'm enjoying myself. It's quite nice, so that's about it.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So then, your report, 8.6A, Report 2022-212 from the Bylaw Enforcement Officer regarding a departmental update report. Is there anything you want to highlight for council in that?
Nothing that I need to highlight, no. No, sir.
Questions from council on the report? Not seeing any. Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that report 2022-212 from the Bylaw Enforcement Officer be received and filed for information purposes only. Anybody want to speak to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. It will not always be that easy. But it usually will be. Thanks.
Thank you.
And then we go to 8.6C, Report 2022-216 from the Legislative Coordinator Deputy Clerk regarding the Embro Dam review. Karen, is there anything you want to highlight for council in that?
I don't believe so. Just an overview for council on some of the historic resolutions and reports and what's been done up until this point regarding the Embro Dam review.
Questions from council on that report? I guess the first thing I would just say is thank you for that report, because it is good. This has been going on for a long period of time, and really there's only 2 members of this council today who were involved with it at all. And even in the last term, Paul, there wasn't a lot going on for you as a board member, really, right? So I think good for us to have this to refer to. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that report 2022-216 from the Legislative Coordinator Deputy Clerk be received and filed for information purposes only. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And then to the delegation, 7A. Sargent and Chris from Upper Thames, Water Information Management, Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, Embro Dam Environmental Assessment. And I'll turn it over to you. I think you had said 30 minutes. I always say, assume that this council's done their homework, they've read what was in their agenda, hit the highlights, and leave time for them to ask you questions. I'm sure they will have some for you.
All right. Thank you, Council, for inviting the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority for the presentation. My name is Sarjit Singh. I'll be presenting on the class environmental assessment that has been reinitiated this year for the Embro Dam. To provide an overview of the site, the dam is located within the Mud Creek watershed. So if you draw your attention to the screens, this is the Mud Creek. The dam is located right here on the Youngsville Drain. The Youngsville Drain drains into North Branch Creek, which eventually combines with the Mud Creek that drains into the Middle Thames River. This is aerial of the site. As you can see, the dam is located on the eastern region of the parcel, highlighted by the orange box. This dam was constructed in 1959. It has a relatively small drainage area. It is owned, the dam and the conservation area are both owned by the authority. However, the operating costs are borne by the township. The conservation area is managed by the Embro Pond Association. These are a few images that show the site quickly. The dam is about 100 meters in length, 4.5 meters in height. It has 3 to 4 feet of overboard. There is water present in the reservoir year-round. It is controlled by using stop logs. It is controlled by using stop logs in the intake right here. The water is piped through a culvert and it outlets into the spillway shown right here. It is important to understand why this study was initiated. In 2007, UTRC hired Acres International to do a dam safety assessment, and Acres pointed out some concerns regarding the embankment stability. Next year, UTRC hired another consultant named Naylor Engineering, and they conducted a geotechnical investigation which concluded that the dam is not meeting the current standards for the stability, which led to, in 2015, led to initiation of this Class EA. So this EA has been going on for quite a while. It is important to mention that it was paused just after 2017, which will come into play later on during the presentation. This is an overview of the Class EA process that the authority is following. The Class EA is being conducted under Conservation Ontario's Class EA document for remedial flood and erosion control works. The EA was is initiated generally using a notice of intent. We initiated the public contact. We collect the background information and characterize the data based on the existing to establish the existing environmental conditions. So we collect technical, social, and cost data on that. We identify and develop alternatives and select a preferred alternative based on a criteria. We prepare concept level plans and submit it for public comments, which has a period of 30 days, after which it is submitted to the Ministry of Environment as a final submission. In 2015, we collected a few sets of data for this study, which included topographical surveys, social and cultural environment, archaeology, water quantity, quality, engineering and technical data. In 2015, we identified 5 different alternatives, which included doing nothing, leaving the dam as it is, repairing the dam, removing the dam through different means, or lowering the dam crest, and naturalizing the pond. It is important to point out that Alternative 3 was the preferred alternative when we completed the report in 2017, which may or may not change at this point. This is a schematic of the preferred alternative that was identified in 2017. As you can see, the dam would be removed according to in that selection. And this is just showing a conceptual level drawing of what it might look like. This is one of the criteria that was used to evaluate different alternatives, which is a cost estimate. These costs are from 2016 period, so it's a little outdated, but it gives a good picture of how much different alternatives will cost and what will be the day-to-day or annual operating costs of both operation and maintenance of the dam. It is important to point out that even though doing nothing doesn't cost as much, it has the lowest cost. However, there is a liability associated with if there is a dam failure due to overtopping or a dam breach, there will be some liability. After 2017, the process was paused because it was pointed out that we should conduct a cultural heritage evaluation report because of the public concern. So UTRCA hired a consultant named TMHC, which conducted the study. The purpose was to evaluate the dam with the heritage evaluation criteria set out by the Ontario Heritage Act. The report identified that the site has a status of natural area or park under the current Oxford County Heritage Resources Inventory, and the report contains history about the Oxford County, Zorra Township, and an indigenous settlement, which is not really associated with the dam. During their study, TMHC initiated contact with different parties, including the Township, the Pond Association, Ontario Archives, and the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sports, which is now the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism because they changed the duties of the Ontario Heritage Act. This report has been finalized and will be posted on UTRC's website to invite comments from the public, including the Zorra Heritage Committee, Embro Pond Association, and the township itself to provide any input. These are a few excerpts from the report. As mentioned before, they did conduct the evaluation as set out by the Ontario Heritage Act, and it was found out that the dam does not meet the evaluation, the heritage criteria as set out by the Act. They evaluated the site based on historical importance, design value, and the contextual value, but they did point out that we should put up signage to show the history of the area itself. So since 2015, after the study was initiated, and after which it was resumed, this diagram shows a description of what has happened and is happening right now with the study. So as you can see, we noted the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority issued a notice of intent on November 3rd this year. We will be requesting different groups and public members to express interest in creating a liaison committee, which will increase the public input. We have provided additional information to our consultant, Metric Solution, to provide additional current environmental conditions updates. They are currently reevaluating the existing conditions and trying to identify any new alternatives. It's important to point out that in the CO Class EA, there is no requirement for the public information centers, but we have conducted those so far because we feel like this is a sensitive site and public input is required to be effective in the process. I can skip this slide. So the next steps in the foreseeable future are we'll be conducting a fourth public information session in late January next year. We'll be presenting any updates to Zorra during the February. We'll be reporting to UTRCA board, and notice of filing is being planned to be posted during the March, and following that there will be a comment period before we submit the final report to the Ministry of Environment. These are the different stakeholders that we have identified. These include the UTRCA staff itself, different provincial ministries, some federal bodies, local township, First Nations, local groups, and there are some other groups that the information is available on the site. These are some useful links, so if you would like, you can follow these to read the Class EA process. There is a notice board site that UTS has put up that contains all the background information and all the updated information. And there is a link to the Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report, the most revised copy. And if you have any questions, if you have any comments, questions, you require further information, or if you would like to be put on the mailing list for the future updates, we'll be happy to do so. You can either contact me or my supervisor, David Charles. And that's it.
Thanks. Questions on the delegation from council?
The page that has it's called Field Data Collection Site Characterization. What is fluvial geomorphology looking at?
They look at different soil types. For example, different soil layers, clay, silt, just to establish the baseline of what the soil types are. Please can expand further on that?
Yeah, if I may, I can expand on that a little bit further. So fluvial geomorphology is really what Sarji was speaking to, but fluvial is the flow in rivers. So it's the meander, it's the soil conditions as you stated, but the how the erosion naturally occurs in the water course and the impacts that might have. It's very important for the preferred alternative as we try and naturalize that. We want to get it as close as possible to a natural condition, which requires less maintenance in the future. So knowing the flows, the slope through that area, the types of soils, you can get the meanders, the riffles, the drops in elevation correct so that it is closer to what would naturally establish. The alternative, of course, is to let nature take its course, right. And that can cause more erosion as it tries to get to that preferred state.
So it's kind of helping nature out.
Giving it a helpful hand, trying to get it as close to a more natural condition than the current bottom of that pond, which is muck, basically. That's established sediment that has established there over time as it got trapped, basically because of the dam.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, you mentioned that the numbers that were presented are 2016, I believe. So the numbers in 2023 are going to be much larger. Is the relationship similar between these numbers?
So yeah, I think
the impacts.
if I can address that. The intent when you're doing an environmental assessment is that you provide relative measurement of costs. They're not exact costs because there's various differences, various flexibility in how the design would actually take place, the types of things that would be incorporated into it. So the intent is to give a relative assessment of the cost so that you can compare the various alternatives from a cost perspective. So in view of that, those costs, that same relative nature of those costs is probably still very valid today. In order to take that further, it would require some preliminary or even conceptual design to get to that stage, which is usually subsequent to the completion of the EA, where you start getting into the nitty-gritty of the design, and that's where you can actually pin down those costs. So they were intended to give a relative measure of cost to be able to compare them, and I think they still serve that purpose.
Okay. It's just that they're going to be bigger.
The cost, consulting costs have gone up. I'm sure construction costs will have gone up. There are various things that we can do to work through that efficiently and effectively. It's really a matter of how far you want to get, how quickly. We can work with nature to try and keep those costs down, as we've demonstrated on some of our past dam removal projects. To work with available funding, to encourage that natural establishment of vegetation, to encourage the flow channels to establish and strengthen them as available. So it's still a very wide range of alternatives in any one of those, variables within any one of those alternatives, but they're still relatively proportional to each other.
And last question, what would happen if the dam failed? It's a pond out in the country, there's no buildings around. What's the expectation of damage level?
So the dam safety review that was done back in the early 2000s, finished up in 2007, as Sarjeet was pointing out, that establishes a number of things. One of them is called the incremental hazard classification. This is a very low hazard classification, something like Fanshawe Dam on the higher end of the scale. In this case, you're talking mostly about environmental harm that would happen if it was to fail. It's holding back a fair amount of sediment that could be released into the watercourse downstream. So there's some risk associated with that. There's not all that likely a chance of there being loss of life. It's always possible, but that would probably be through transient population, people that happen to be there on the site at the time of the failure, and that's dependent on the failure mode. That could happen during a major event, rainfall event, where not likely that there would be very many people on site, or there's something referred to as a sunny day failure, which that could happen while there are people on site. As a structural failure, especially given the structural instabilities of the structure, that's a possibility.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, just to add context to some of the options that are in the report. The only question I have, and Paul asked the last one there, but why was the dam built in the first place, and what benefit is there to keeping it in place versus returning it to a natural channel?
That's a good question, and one I'll do my best to provide our view on that. But that's really more for the public to tell us what their, what values they see that are out there. As far as the original construction, from all the information that's available in the archaeological assessments and the heritage study just completed, it's a past site of a dam. So there's a historical aspect of it, but that was reconstructed in the 50s when we took possession of the property. At that point in time, the focus was a lot on regional and local recreational opportunities. reestablishing some of the storage that had been lost in the watershed as a result of removing forests and wetlands and that sort of thing. So it was, at the time, thought to be a good thing from a number of perspectives, the recreational one and also from the water course. Since that time, we understand that a natural flowing water course is by far the preferred alternative. Putting a pond in place does not replace the same type of storage that a wetland would create, the same type of flood attenuation, the same type of natural amenities. Instead, it sits there and actually prevents the flow of water, prevents the flow of sediment and that sort of thing from naturally occurring. So I guess that gives you that sort of that initial perspective and the kind of perspective from our perspectives now. A lot of the amenities that are enjoyed are documented in the reports. It's a great recreational amenity. Trail systems out there. I've been and walked at various times in various parts of the season. Enjoy it. It seems to have gotten a lot of use more recently with people looking for those types of amenities. And it would be our hope that those same types of amenities can continue in the absence of that less than natural pond that's there.
Anyone else? Okay, thanks a lot. Much appreciated. Looking forward to that public information meeting in January, late January? Yes. All right, I'll see you then.
And we'd like to be back to present the
course.
results in February so that we can have more dialogue on that at that time.
Of course. Thanks.
Thanks very much for having us.
And then 8.2A, Matt, Recreation, Report 2022-219 from the Director of Recreation and Facilities regarding facilities lease and use agreements renewals. Is there anything you want to highlight for council?
So we are timing out some of these agreements that we kind of line up with the renewal of council and new term of council so that we can see direction from council on how we proceed with them. A few things to highlight. I met with all these groups and they've been presented with the draft agreements. They're agreeable to what's been being presented to council this evening. The one that is just a long-standing item of kind of it has been addressed formally is the Scout Hall in Tempsford and kind of formalizing an agreement with that user group. So that's kind of just an item that we want to tackle in the next year, just to kind of formalize that and limit liability to the township potentially at that location, as well as understand a bit better of our responsibilities both in that location.
Questions from council on the report? Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, just as we previously discussed quickly on the use of the Scout Hall, I think part of the negotiation is just to start understanding or come with a firm understanding of A, the use of it, and B, why that could be so tightly tied to that location specifically, the Scout function, just to see if there's other uses for that building or if their programs could be facilitated elsewhere in the municipality.
So yeah, the goal with discussions with them will be to first understand their needs and our needs together, what our current responsibilities are with regards to that, trying to get more historical context of how we ended up where we are with that, the use of the building by the Scouts, and yeah, to explore alternatives potentially for them that might work out better for us as the township and for them long term, that we don't have that they don't have a large capital commitment to, or something that's going to financially burden them or financially burden the township.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Grigg.
Thank you. So thanks for that information. Great to know that these user groups are not flagging any concerns from these renewed agreements. And also great to revise a schedule so that it runs with our terms. I think that's a great way of proceeding. I have a couple of questions about the Scout Hall arrangement, and you may or may not have answers for them, but I think the great thing about including it in this review, even though you have to still go away and do some work and come back to council, I think tying it in with these other groups is a great signal that, there's an equitable approach to all of our user groups, and creating some sort of consistency allows for everyone to thrive. So with the, and I also wanted to acknowledge that you've inherited this very bizarre, slightly foggy history between the Scouts and the township. So the couple of questions about our current involvement with the Scout Hall. I know that there was a roof that was put on that we had some funding provided for at some point in recent-ish history. Is this a facility that that we provide any inspections to when we're doing like our health and safety inspections or any evaluations of our facilities in the recreation department?
So this is one of the areas that we need to address and formalize, because we don't, and it has come up through our health and safety committee. Should we be doing our regular inspections with inside it? In my opinion, is that yes, we should, because it is an area that our staff do enter and do conduct work inside, so it is a workplace. But we need to basically kind of formalize that what we're maintaining inside, so we know what we're entering for, and then we can kind of best answer our inspection frequency and what our responsibilities are with it.
So through this, am I okay to go again? Yeah. And through this process, we'll be able to determine if this is something as we move into municipal asset management, whether or not this is a municipal asset that we are managing and at what level of service. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think that I want to draw attention to the fact that I do believe that this is a municipal asset. It is on our property. There's no formal lease agreement that says otherwise, that they have ownership of this, and that's why I think we need to take this step to really put that agreement in place or look at other options. We could turn away and say that we have one council mention from 1979 that talks about them having like a vested interest in the property, but it's not their ownership, and they don't have a lease where they have sole access or ownership of the site. We have these agreements in place in other places. The Harrington Hall is a good example of where we have HACA, the Harrington Area Community Association, with a management and use agreement there. So just looking to follow up and do something similar here that outlines the maintenance of it. And yeah, as you mentioned, there's been times where, whether it be a roof, HVAC units, things like that, where when a need arises, the township gets involved with capital contributions. So we just need to look at that planning with the asset management side of it as well.
Thank you. So because it's not something that we have a formal agreement with, and we don't have that knowledge, and it's not sort of, we're working through getting that clarity on it. We're not seeing any projected costs on the capital budget projects for that structure, because it's not something that's currently on our radar in that capacity. But would it be fair to assume that there would be some amendments to the capital projects if we were to proceed with that being a structure that we are maintaining in our asset management plan?
I think if we were to come back and look at this as a continuing agreement, we would, in my report coming back, and outline the costs of entering that agreement, including capital costs that we could be associated with that long term, so that council can make a decision fully with those in mind.
Anyone else on this report? Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Grigg, that council enact bylaw 89-22 to authorize the execution of an agreement between the Corporation of the Township of Zorra and the Embro Lawn Bowling Club, and that council enact bylaw 88-22 to authorize the execution of agreement between the Corporation of the Township of Zorra and the Thistle Theatre, and that council direct staff to enter negotiations with Contour and Tempsford Scouting regarding rental facilities. Does anybody wish to speak to that? Deputy Mayor Grigg.
Just further to some of the comments I just made, I think this is fantastic, and I know this is a significant undertaking, because there's so much history of how it's historically been, but because there are, in regards to the Scout Hall, but I think because we have these other systems in place that are functioning really well, we do have the knowledge within staff and within our policies to manage these relationships in a way that is both equitable but also supportive to these different user groups. So I'm looking forward to hearing the results from the negotiations with the Scout Hall and seeing what types of impacts that could have for Zorra. So thank you.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thanks, Matt. I think it's good for the community groups that this is, it'll bring some like certainty and predictability to the relationship, what they can and can't expect, what they can and can't do, which is always a good thing in the end for all concerned. So thank you. So we have nothing under building public works, down to finance, and I think we'll try and get through as much of the rest of the agenda as we can and then take a break for supper right before we get into probably capital and operating. We'll see how we go. But right now, 8.5A, Report 2022-207 from the Tax Collector Deputy Treasurer regarding 2023 assessment values. Linda, what do you want to highlight for council before I ask them for questions?
So provided as information for council, we've received the 2023 roll, and since the values for taxation are based on the 2016 assessment values, that's allowed us to get a clearer picture of what we're looking at as far as taxation revenue increase for 2023. Schedule A, I think it does a really good job at illustrating the net growth assessed value increase and assessment and what that will result in for 2023, an increase of $128,300 through taxation.
Questions for Linda on the report? Paul?
Yeah, one question, and that's Schedule A, and I noticed with all those numbers there that new construction commercial and new construction industrial in 22 there's values there and then they go to zero, and I presume that's because they move from being new construction to being part of full commercial and full industrial.
That's correct.
But what mystified me a little bit was how come farmland assessment and large industrial assessments went down? What happens there to cause those numbers to decrease?
Yeah, so for the large industrial, that is actually the large parcel on Brock Street. There were several buildings that were demolished, and that is now classed as vacant industrial, so it moved that assessment. For the farm, that's likely attributed to some being converted to probably a residential class. We'll likely get a report from MPAC, and we'll have to redirect that back to farmland.
That makes sense. We reduced our tax income by tearing down those buildings, I guess. But that had to be part of the process. So thanks for the information.
You're welcome.
It'll come back, Paul. It'll come back. Yeah. Any other questions for Linda on this report? All right. Moved by Stuart, seconded by Greg, that report 2022-207 from the Tax Collector Deputy Treasurer be received and filed for information purposes only. Anybody wish to speak to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And 8.5B, report 2022-215 from the Director of Finance regarding the remuneration contract position of the Chief Administrative Officer. And Diane, is there anything you want to highlight for council in that one?
This is just a little housekeeping, as the CAO is a contract position and their position is not in the salary grid, the bylaw that's being brought forward to council today. So this report just includes them to also receive the cost of living increases going forward as part of the policy.
Questions from council on this report? Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Grigg, that the contract position of the Chief Administrative Officer receive the annual cost of living increase as outlined in Policy 300-40. Anybody wish to speak to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 8.5C, Report 2022-214 from the Director of Finance regarding council policies and practices. Diane, is there anything you want to highlight in that for council?
This just outlines a study that we had conducted with the area municipalities and shows council where all the other municipalities are at in various allocations or payments to councils on various items, meals, mileage, etc. If there's any other questions on this report, I'll be happy to answer them.
Questions from council on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, how much did the township reimburse for meals this year?
Less than $500.
Okay, so it's a fairly insignificant amount. Okay.
Anyone else? That might be kind of a historically low number though, right? I mean 2020, 2021 might have been lower, but before that I'm sure it was more than $500 a year. I mean, I'll tell you straight up, there was years before COVID where I did more than $500 a year in meals, but when conferences were full on going places.
Well, when you have a conference, though, usually the meals are included. So we find the meals that we're paying out is basically for training courses they may be taking that don't have meals. So where you're going to see maybe more of an increase is in the travel expense, mileage, or via if you're going someone further away.
Anyone else on this report? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that report 2022-214 from the Director of Finance be received and filed, and that council direct staff to amend policy 200-10, business and travel expenses, to update the meal allowance to $100 a day, with the exception of specific situations, and that the Chief Administrative Officer has the right to monitor expenses, and further that the technology allowance for council members be consolidated into the annual salary for councillors, the Deputy Mayor, and the Mayor, and that the wage bylaw reflect these changes. Deputy Mayor Grigg is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that?
I will try to be concise with this. Some of this has come forward, I think, from some questions that we asked of staff in relation to our evaluation of how we wanted to proceed with the deputy mayor position. So when we were looking at what that role would be and what compensations would look like, I know I went down a bit of a rabbit hole of what all compensations look like and what makes sense and what everyone else is doing everywhere else about everything else. And so I think it was great to have this look at this, kind of moving separate from what that deputy mayor role. Obviously now we've implemented that, and that's fine. But moving forward, looking back at some of those policies that had those dollar figure amounts in them, they just clearly were becoming outdated. I still like the mileage piece is a little bit for me. You know, I kind of go back and forth with what I think about it. But I'm fine to just leave it. I think, you know, we are coming from all over the municipality, and some of us live closer to the places that we travel to for meetings, and I think some of us are appointed to boards and committees that meet far more frequently than others. So there is a bit of an equity piece in the compensation. The compensation isn't very low for us who sit around this horseshoe, or isn't very high for us. It's quite low for us to sit around this horseshoe. So allowing the option for councillors to claim that, I think I'm fine with. And I think the best thing, I mean, I know sometimes we ask for a lot of reports with a lot of information from staff, and sometimes the end result is, like we tie them up for how much and what was the benefit. I think the main benefit coming out of this is, sure, we've updated an administrative policy that staff would have updated anyways, they would have gotten to it, but I think this conversation also gave an opportunity for Diane to identify that separating out that technology allowance piece was really just an added administrative piece, and on the back end of it, there was extra accounting that had to be done for the HST write-off or whatever it is. So I appreciate that in the context of these discussions that we've been able to leverage a bit of an efficiency that staff have been able to identify, and I never would have known to ask that question because I didn't have that information, but in having these discussions we were able to leverage that efficiency. So happy to support this motion as written, and thanks to staff for the report.
Councillor Stewart is the seconder. Do you want to speak to it? Paul. Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, a couple comments. First of all, on the meal, $100 a day seems a lot to me, but then my idea of a high-end restaurant is Harvey's, so I'm not probably the guy to comment on that, so I have no problem with that. As far as the mileage, it was noted in the report, the distance from Uniondale Station, which kind of applies to me. It's 57 kilometers round trip for me to come to a council meeting, and I did some calculating. It's about $200 a year on gas alone just to come to council meetings, and if you add on some other things, I can get to $300 quite easily just for gas plus wear and tear on vehicle. And Katie mentioned, it's a bit of an equity thing. I can afford $200 or $300 for gas, but maybe somebody else that's from my end of the township who considering running, it may be the tipping point. And last meeting we adjusted day meetings for the next year from 9 to 9:30, so it would possibly be more accommodating. I think this kind of falls into the same category. It's not a huge amount of money, but it may be just the difference that makes somebody considering representing their area. And whether members of council claim mileage is totally voluntary. I know some members don't claim any. Personally, I only claim for meetings that I'm required to attend. So if I attend something as part of my job, which I don't have to be there, I don't claim mileage for it. So I think there's enough leeway built in there and nobody's going to abuse it. So that's just my comments on the policies. I appreciate the small adjustments that were made and the other parts that were left unchanged.
I'll read it again, call the question. Moved by Greg, seconded by Stewart, that report 2022-214 from the Director of Finance be received and filed, and that council directs staff to amend policy 200-10, business and travel expenses, to update the meal allowance to $100 per day, with the exception of specific situations, and that the Chief Administrative Officer has the right to monitor expenses. And further, that the technology allowance for council members be consolidated into the annual salary for councillors, the Deputy Mayor, and the Mayor, and that the wage bylaw reflect these changes. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thanks, Dan. And 8.5D. Do you want to do, let me ask council and I guess Diane, do you want to wait and do capital budget and operating budget all after break altogether? We can skip down to 8.6 and correspondence and information items. What are you guys thinking? Yeah? Makes more sense to put them together? Okay. All right. So then 8.6A. Oh, we did that. 8.6B, report 2022-198 from the Legislative Coordinator Deputy Clerk regarding the 2022 Mayor's Monarch Butterfly Pledge update. Karen, what would you like to highlight for council?
I think I'll just leave that up to open to question and comment.
Questions from council? So I have a question then. I love this report. Big fan of the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. We're making a lot of progress, though. We're getting a lot of things done. We've committed to the things we were going to do. We did those things. We've committed to new things that we're still working on. Do we get to a point where we say, this is not how we function, we've done good things, do we functionally need to be part of the pledge anymore, or do we just generally look after monarchs and we're a good community and we don't need to do the pledge formal anymore? Ask. Speaking to council because it's their meeting.
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, thank you. Staff would agree with everything that you stated. Yes, we hope to accomplish everything in the pledge, and it'll just become part of our day-to-day operations.
Thank you. Anybody else on that report? Just gotta find it here now since I skipped around. What did I do with it? Do I not have it? Oh, there it is. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that report 2022-198. Yeah, from the Legislative Coordinator Deputy Clerk be received and filed for information purposes only. Anybody wish to speak to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And .6D, Report 2022-220 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding 2022 to 2026 strategic plan. Don, is there anything you want to highlight in that?
No, the only thing I would say is that we would likely keep the mission and values as is. I think they've stood the test of time, unless council feels that they need to be revisited, but I think they're still relevant. The 4 pillars that we have in the present strategic plan would likely be replaced with a triple bottom line strategic plan that a lot of municipalities are using now as well. So that would be the only changes I see, plus the items that council, staff, and the public present to council for consideration.
Questions from council on that report? All right. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Stewart, that council direct township staff to develop the 2023 to 2026 strategic plan in-house, utilizing the previous strategic plan as a guideline, and that council approve of the strategic plan timeline as indicated in report 2022-220. Paul, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
I agree with Don that we don't need to go back to ground zero and start over. I think we have a good blueprint. You make a few modifications, but basically, fortunately, the strategic plan from the last term, we accomplished a lot of those things, so it's time to update it and add some more things to our strategic plan. And I like the fact that we'll be working on it in the new year. Personally, I haven't given it a whole lot of thought. I've been more concentrating on the budget and getting that out. And then over the holidays, I can start thinking about some big ideas and big plans that I want to see included in there. So I agree with the report that what we need is an update, and I think the timeline that's presented is entirely appropriate.
Councillor Stewart is the seconder to speak to. Anyone else? I think this is a good plan. I think, to me, one of the strengths that I've seen in the strategic planning that we've done here at Zorra is that it is, as you said, Paul, like highly actioned, right? The stuff actually gets done. So I would just say to everybody, try to think about what you want in that strategic plan from a strategic standpoint. General policy directions that we want to go, not necessarily specific tasks for staff, although those aren't like inappropriate, but better if we can give them general strategic direction, and then they can come back with us with reports that say, here's a way or ways that you can move in that direction, right? And that can give them like broad direction from council for the next 4 years to go and do a whole bunch of work without having to come and check in with us every 2 weeks or wait 2 weeks to check in with us before they can actually go and do a thing if they're given appropriate strategic direction. So very excited about moving forward with this. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 10, there's A and B under boards and committees, and I have a motion here to receive and file both. So first of all, are you okay with receiving and filing both? Anybody want to separate those? Anybody have any questions on either 10A or B, or comments on 10A or B? Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that items 10A and B be received and filed for information purposes only. Anybody wish to speak to either of those? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 11, information items. So I have a motion here to receive and file 11A through D. Are there any? There's only A through C, right? I've got it. Is there, does anybody want to pull anyone? Paul?
I don't want to pull them out for the vote, but I do have some information to go with A and B, to added information. Okay. I noticed, and I'm glad that County Land Division does send this back to us, because quite often it's a result of something that we have looked at previously, so it's nice to know what the result, what their decision was. But I noticed on both of them that they were given a condition that they provide cash in lieu of parkland to the satisfaction of the Township of Zorra. So I didn't know who to ask, so I asked Don, my default question person, and what's our policy on this? And he sent me the chart, and essentially what our policy is that we have a flat rate that we charge per lot, which is equivalent to approximately 5% of the estimated lot value. And so, unless I'm wrong on this, Don, please correct me, for 2022, we would be getting $4,500 per lot, and that goes up to $4,750 in 2023. So that's what that condition, to meet that condition, we will get $9,000 out of this decision. And I presume at some point, before 2024, we will readdress that, depending on what the government lets us do, to update those numbers. So I just wanted to, that was something I didn't understand. I asked the question. I just thought I'd pass it on to the rest of council.
Yes, Karen and I have talked about this, so we will have to review the policy in 2023 based on what the province has done lately, so we'll have to see how that fits within our policy.
That was it, Paul? Then I have moved by Stewart, seconded by Mitchell, that items 11A through D be received and filed for information purposes only. Anybody wish to speak to either of those? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And no unfinished business, notices of motion, 13A. Okay. I'm reading this one once. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Stewart. Whereas the Township of Zorra is a top 10 municipality in the Ontario for aggregate extraction, and whereas many aggregate pits are accessed from township gravel roads, which require extra maintenance and are often damaged by high volumes of heavy truck traffic, and whereas residents who live and drive on aggregate access roads are negatively impacted by the compromised conditions of those roads, therefore be it resolved that Public Works staff prepare a report identifying all Zorra Township gravel road sections which provide access to one or more active aggregate pits to be presented to Council no later than the April 5th, 2023 Council meeting, and that this report includes but is not limited to the following information for each aggregate road section. 1. The length between the two nearest paved roads. 2. The number of active aggregate pits. 3. The extra maintenance work grading, graveling, dust suppressant on aggregate roads compared to typical gravel roads of the same length, and the 2022 cost of that extra work. 4, the estimated cost to upgrade and pave the full section to the highest road load rating, year-round or load-restricted, of the nearest paved crossroads. 5, the estimated annual cost of maintenance once it is paved. 6, the estimated lifespan of the pavement before replacement is required. Councillor Mitchell, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
Okay. A little bit of background on this. On November the 17th, I received a call from a resident lives on line 29 between Road 96 and Road 92. And to say the least, he was concerned about the condition of his road due to the heavy gravel truck traffic on it. So I arranged a site meeting with Steve, Oliver, Derek Collins, myself, and I notified the landowner that we would be meeting on site and gave him the time and when it would happen. When we arrived, there was a bit of a crowd. There was, I counted 15 residents, area residents there, which included representatives of the 3 pits that are in the north end of line 29. To say the least, the residents were not happy, and Steve and Derek did the best they could to explain the maintenance that is done on their road and the challenges that maintenance does, as far as there's extra gravel put on there, there's extra dust suppressant put on there, it is graded more often than the typical gravel road, but with the amount of heavy truck traffic, it just gets beat up. The residents told us in no uncertain terms that their road is a cloud of dust when it's dry, and it's a swamp when it's wet at all. I pointed out that we all agreed that the solution is to pave that road, but I pointed out in round figures that how much it would cost to pave just that 3 kilometers of road, and the fact that there was no provision in the township road maintenance plan and upgrades to turn any gravel roads into paved roads. So after about 15, 20 minutes, seemed a lot longer than that, I was challenged to come up with a solution. So also during this meeting, Steve pointed out that this is not the only road in Zorra Township that has aggregate pits on it. There are many roads that face the same challenges. So result number one from that meeting was, before we left, I asked Steve to come up with some numbers of what it would cost to pave that section of road, and within 24 hours Steve got back to me with a detailed breakdown of what that would be, and he gave a couple of options. To do 1.5 kilometers, which is from the entrance to the most southern of the 3 pits to up to Road 96, would cost $405,000. And to do the whole section of 3 kilometers from Road 92, which is the road that goes through Lakeside, up to Road 96 would be $815,000. So that got me thinking a little more, and result number 2 of that meeting is this motion. And the rationale for writing this motion is this is a township-wide problem and we need to look at it township-wide. What we need is information on the scale of the problem, and I drafted this motion. I consulted with Steve. I wanted to make sure that what I wanted was doable. He confirmed with me that the information is available. It will take a little bit of work to get it, but the main reason that we agreed on an April 5th deadline was that the next couple of months he'd be really busy with doing tendering, and then he'd be able to get to this after that's done. So why I put the different things in the motion: point number 1, the length. We need to know how many kilometers of gravel road are impacted with this problem in the township. We need to know how many active gravel pits there are on each section of these roads, so that we can kind of categorize which ones are getting more traffic and therefore more damage. Third point, the extra maintenance work, and I don't think the residents really believed what Steve and Derek said about the extra time and effort that goes into their road, and I know they keep pretty good records of all the work that they do on the road section, so the information is there so that we can show residents that these roads are getting extra work, even though it doesn't appear so. Point number 4 is, of course, the big one: what it would cost to upgrade and pave these roads. And what I'm suggesting is that for line 29 as an example, Road 96 is a year-round full-load road. Road 92 is a seasonal road, half-load road. So if we were to pave that section, we would pave it to the highest grade level, which would be a full-load road. And point number 5, estimated annual cost to maintain it. There's higher standards that need to be maintained by provincial legislation for gravel roads. So just because we pave it doesn't mean it's going to cost us less to maintain it. And the last one is estimated length of time. How long will this road hold up until we need to replace it? So step number 3 will depend on council's decisions. The first decision is whether we agree to pass this motion and ask for this report. What I hope would come, if we do that, what I hope would come for, if we come back and council agrees that we look at maybe 3 or 4 roads that are in the worst condition, that have the highest traffic. We ask for a bit more information as to the number of, not only the number of aggregate pits on that section, but to do some traffic studies of how many actual trucks are going up and down the road out of those pits. And also to engage with the pit owners to find out how long those pits are expected to be in operation, because there's no point spending money on paving a road if the pit's going to be run out in 2 years, but if it's going to be there in 20 years. And also, an idea I threw out at the meeting was, would some of these pit operators be willing to go into partnership with the township if that allowed them to operate year-round? Would they be willing to kick in $100,000 or $200,000 towards upgrading their road if it allowed them to run an extra 2.5 months of the year? Because I think they can pull a lot of sand and gravel out in those 2 months, 2.5 months, especially if many of their competitors can't operate in those times. So, and if we go to that step and get more information, then the next step would be to update our road plan. How can we weave 1 or 2 or 3 of these roads into our road plan? That, not to make a pun, but that's a ways down the road in this process. But if we decide to get this information, and then in the next step we decide not to do anything more with it than receive and file, what we will have is information that we can pass on to not only the people on line 29, but people on other gravel roads that are facing the same issues, an understanding of what we are doing and how much it's costing the township to maintain their roads, even though their roads are beat up in spite of all that effort. And also what it would cost not only to pave their road, because these people, it's their road, but what it would cost if we were to do multiple roads in the township, and the impact that would have on our budgeting process. We would also have some really good data to pass on to TAPMO and the provincial government to say, we've been saying for years that the 790,000 that we're getting from royalties this year, the fact that there is low taxation based on these gravel pits, lower than it should be, and put those numbers in context, that 790,000 won't even pave one of our roads, and to use it. So rather than just saying we're not getting enough money to maintain our roads, here's the evidence that we dug deep to find out what the damage is, what it's costing us to maintain these roads now, and what it would cost us to upgrade them to an acceptable level for the residents who not only live on those roads, but drive down those roads. So that's the process behind it. Steve tells me that this is doable, and so I've taken up the challenge that the residents gave me, come forward with this motion, and I hope the rest of council supports it.
Councillor Stewart, as the seconder, do you wish to speak to it?
As usual, Paul's detail covers most of the items that I would have probably brought up, but I think the big thing is that it gives an overall data set that we can work from and I'm not going to underestimate the amount of work involved, because we do have to identify all the locations, but the costs for operating these roads or maintaining these roads is known to a certain degree. And we have recent data, obviously, for the costs of upgrading any of the paved roads and what that costs in today's dollars. So I think for the amount of work associated with pulling this report together and what it helps us clarify and make better decisions down the road, that it makes sense to me.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Griffin.
I hope this adds more value to discussion than just poking at Paul a little bit, as I sometimes do. So when I first read this notice of motion, I had some concerns that it was I wasn't really sure exactly what you were driving at. I knew what the issue was, but I wasn't sure what the end goal was. And my first thought was, can we not just get comparators of total life cycle costs for the average gravel road that has high truck traffic versus paved road per kilometer, just to have that quick comparator. My thought was that was the easiest way to get the information for both council and the public to have a general concept of when we look at our roads projects to have an understanding of what an increased cost could look like if we were to consider doing something like paving any of our gravel roads. So I took the opportunity to have a conversation with Paul and dig a little deeper into understanding exactly some of the background information that he just filled us in on and some of those end goals that could potentially happen. So I think I'm interested to hear, what could potentially be possible with, there may be a business case for pit owners to want to make upgrades if it allows for half-load roads to be operable for them full season, and it may or may not be beneficial to the municipality. But we won't know. We won't be able to consider those without having this preliminary report come back to us, and this is information Steve's able to get, so I will be in support of this motion. I took you around there for a minute. Yeah, it was a lot when I first looked at it, but I see where you're going now, and I'm happy to support.
Anyone else? I'm not reading it again and calling the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And bylaws, which I went quickly through, and I think I'm safe to do these now, right? So, moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that bylaws 87-22, 88-22, 89-22, and 90-22 be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. And further, that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And items of community interest and the calendar. So, we are at December 21st today. So really, not a whole lot happening over the next 2 weeks. The Zorra firefighter recognition is on the evening of January 5th, correct, Chief? And Deputy Mayor Grigg, you're attending that? Because I will not be there, thank you. You're attending as well, thank you. And the next thing that I see on here is we are back here on, OCFA AGM on January 12th. And Deputy Mayor Grigg, you're attending that for me as well. Thank you. And then we're back here on the 18th. Am I missing anything else there? At 9:30, thank you. Yes, back here on the 18th at 9:30, not at 9. Anybody got anything else in there?
There's a HACA meeting, I believe it's the 9th, be the second.
The 9th?
Second Monday.
Okay.
I don't have it in front of me, but the second Monday of January.
All right. And then, so just while we're talking about that, then, not long after that then is, so the 18th, and then Roma the week after that, 22nd through 24th, I think, right? Okay. All right.
I'm just checking here, there's a Heritage Committee meeting on Wednesday, December the 7th
January?
of January, yeah.
Okay. No, that's not right.
No.
The 7th is a Saturday in January.
Okay. No, sorry, I read the wrong. I'm just trying to decipher Sam's email here.
4th? Wednesday, January 4th? Okay. Anybody else have anything else before we move on from that? Okay. And we have no closed. So all we have left is budget and confirmatory. So supper won't be here for another, half an hour? So we might as well start budget then, if you guys are good.
Yep.
So we will start then with 8.5 D, Report 2022-217 from the Director of Finance regarding the 2023 capital budget amendments. Diane, is there anything you want to highlight in there?
No, this report just brings forward the changes that are from the discussion from the December 7th council meeting. Schedule 1, let me see, Schedule 2 has been revised as we looked at projects within the roads department on the capital to better align the projects so that we could see a more of a streamline or less of hills in our tax levy request in over the next 10 years. And so I've been working with the Director of Public Works, so we've made some adjustments within the 10-year capital plan, and you'll see the 10-year capital plan in the third document. And we continue to look at projects in 2024 to see where we can maybe make some other changes, possibly in the bridges, to help bring down that tax levy and smooth it out a little bit more over the 10-year plan. Okay? Any questions or comments?
Question. Councillor Mitchell.
Yes. So the addition of those 2 paving projects, which is about $190,000, that has no impact on the levy. That's all going to come out of the OCF funds?
That's correct.
Okay, that's how I read it. But
Anyone else? All right then, I have moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell. Whereas the SWIFT Reserve was set up in 2019 for the purpose of achieving increased access to broadband internet in Zorra Township. Whereas the Government of Ontario, through the Accelerated High-Speed Internet Program, has committed nearly $4 billion to connect every region in Ontario to reliable high-speed internet by the end of 2025. Whereas the Township of Zorra is committed to ensuring fiber internet be achieved down every road in the municipality. However, at this time, there is no immediate use for the funds in the reserve, and additional infrastructure needs may be identified. Therefore, be it resolved that staff prepare a report to identify alternate options for the use of the current funds set aside in the SWIFT Reserve for broadband to achieve improved overall fiscal responsibility to the municipality, and that the SWIFT Reserve remain in place at $175,000 annual contribution and is renamed to Infrastructure Projects Reserve for the purpose of new and existing infrastructure projects as identified through the asset management process. Deputy Mayor Grigg is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, please. So this comes from some of the discussions that we had at our last council meeting when we had our first look at the capital budget. There were sort of some questions around the SWIFT program and the reserve that has been building in the future function of that reserve for Zorra. I definitely want to acknowledge that it was set up with specific intention, and while we don't, while we are being told that it should be resolved at the provincial level, until that's done, we won't be able to know for sure that that's exactly how that's going to happen. So what I'm looking for, I think we had all sort of we're always looking for ways to save money and what can we do to have the most efficient use of our funding to provide optimal service level for residents. And because SWIFT may be a program that's on, not the program is on hold, the function of that reserve is currently on hold because of the shift in the program and how successful it may or may not be. It looked like somewhere that we could potentially draw from. But in deeper conversations with staff, there were all sorts of other anticipated costs that will be coming in the next couple of years as we work through our asset management process. And because this reserve contribution is built into our budget, by removing it, if we turn around and we know we're going to have to add in something else in the coming years, then there will be that tax levy impact at that time. So my thought is if we keep that 175 contribution in place, but rename it so that we're clear to ourselves and transparent to residents about the intention of those funds. And so renaming it to Infrastructure Projects Reserve for the purpose of new and existing infrastructure projects, that allows for it to be allocated to whatever is determined to be best at the time. That encompasses a fiber internet or added costs that are required as a result of the asset management process that we're undertaking now. The the amount of money that's sitting in that reserve, well, it feels great to have it there because if we need to dig in and be a part of getting that fiber in the ground, it's a good bulk chunk of money that helps leverage it. We also had some really intensive discussions at the last council meeting about the increase to the cost of borrowing because the delay in the ZMF and what that impact is going to be based on the amount that we're going to be debenturing. So without getting too specific, because I'm absolutely not a director of finance, nor am I a CAO, I wanted to ask that staff reevaluate what that funding in that reserve could be reallocated for, because we're holding it and making a very small amount of interest on it for a potential project that we may not need to do. At the same time, we're seeing really high cost of borrowing on some of these projects that we're having to debenture. So I would like for staff to go away and be able to do an analysis of the best use of those funds now, and then we also have the ability as we proceed forward with this reserve, if we're wanting to do something else with it as it builds again, if other projects have not been identified or financial needs through asset management have not been identified at that time. Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell is the seconder.
Yeah, the reason we started contributing to SWIFT was that if we contributed a percentage, the county was going to contribute a percentage, and if and when there was a project identified in Zorra Township that would make use of those SWIFT funds, we were eligible to get some of the county money out. I went on the SWIFT website and looked at their project page, and to date there have been $10.2 million worth of projects done in Oxford, in Oxford County, of which SWIFT contributed $5.5 million. But none of that money came out of the contribution that we, or as far as I know, the county, that extra money put in. This was done without that extra money. What I found interesting was that all those projects are done in 2022, and there was nothing listed to be done in 23 or 24. So it appears that SWIFT is no longer active in getting these projects done, and that was my interpretation, rightly or wrongly. We've asked, the mayor has asked for clarification of where the province is going and funding this, not only on the fund availability, but the type of infrastructure that's going to be put in, and without really clear answers to coming back, as Katie just said, we do have some significant issues with financing that were unforeseen, and I think we need the flexibility. We've got, what, 800,000 or something like that in there. I agree that we still should put in the 175 for this year. We can do that and keep a relatively reasonable increase in the tax levy. So I fully agree with the tactics that this Katie's bill is bringing forward, that we continued with contributing to it, but we make it a lot more flexibility. We still have the money. It's still our money. And if there's something that our bottom line is, we're supposed to make decisions that are in the best interest of the residents. And if spending that on something else is in the better interest than contributing to a program that we're not sure what it's doing, then that's what we should do. So I fully support her motion.
Anyone else? Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly that I'm trying to catch up on what decisions were made 4 years ago, and I think they were all made for the right intentions then. And the reason I questioned, contributing in the same named reserve was that it didn't make sense anymore because everything had changed. And I think, like you said, the flexibility of where we're bringing this to now, it still doesn't say that the previous 4 years of contributions can't be used for the same purpose that it was originally intended for. And I think that's the important thing, is that as the report will come back and maybe there'll be better solutions, but it doesn't rule out that it could be put towards the same original intent.
Take the chair for a minute. So, not to speak against this, being the one who at the previous council brought this forward to start this reserve and worked with county council to work out the partnership or the potential partnership between the county and the area municipalities to leverage the funds. My first reaction to this was, this is such an important issue, and we specifically set aside this money to get fiber to every residence in the municipality, and my initial gut response was no. The more I thought about this and the more I read this resolution, this is absolutely 100% the right thing to do. We set aside the money for a specific purpose. We don't know if that is frankly going to be needed or not. Hopefully it's not needed. But even if it's needed, we're not going to know for at least 3 years. And in the meantime, as the motion makes clear and as the mover made clear, that money could in fact be better spent. And overall, even if we need the money in 3 years, could end up costing us less money if we allocate it to this place. The reason that I gave up the chair to speak to this is I just want to say, like, unequivocally, I think I am so proud of this motion that this council has looked at this big picture financial view of the municipality strategically and said, wait a minute, we set this aside for a good specific reason. Things have changed. Maybe there's a better way to do it. And as opposed to us specifically saying, don't spend it here, spend it there, we're saying to staff, take a look at our overall financial situation and tell us what the best options are here to get the services that residents want at the best, most effective spend of their tax dollars that we can. This is to me the kind of, high level like governance and strategic direction that councils should be giving to their staff all the time. And I just specifically wanted to give up the chair to say that I think this is the absolute right way to be doing this stuff, is not down in the weeds of, what pens do we buy, and does that grader really need that wing attachment and stuff? But because we could save $10,000 on that wing, and we could then blow $200,000 on this because we just want to keep it protected in the fiber pot, when really, our staff could go and find us a way to say, actually, maybe we can get that money in 3 years if we need it. But in the meantime, we've saved a whole pile of money on a high cost loan that maybe we could avoid a portion of. So I just wanted to give up the chair to say, my gut reaction to this at first was, this is not the right thing to do. This is an important thing. We've set aside the money, but really in the big picture of an overall budget and an overall service envelope, this is 100% the right thing to do and the right way to go about doing it. So just wanted to say that.
I probably didn't need to put this on, but I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And anybody else wish to speak to that? I'm not going to read this one again either. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And, sorry. I don't have another one for D. No, I don't. Thank you. So another one for 8.5D, moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that report 2022-217 from the Director of Finance be received and filed, and that council approve the amendments to the 2023 capital budget as listed in report 2022-217 as amended. Deputy Mayor Grigg is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that?
No, thanks.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 8.5E. Report 2022-218 from the Director of Finance regarding the 2023 operating budget. And just before we start this one, I'll just point out to council where we're at in this. So the next meeting we have on this, as we just went through in the calendar, the next meeting we have, council meeting we have, is January 18. And notwithstanding what you all might decide to do with this portion of the budget today, that would be the meeting at which Diane would be proposing to come back to us with a finalized budget to be passed on the 18th. Of course, it's council's meeting and you don't have to pass it on the 18th, but that's your plan that you've adopted to this point. So just want to give that to you in the context of, to give you context for what we are discussing today, is this operating portion, with the intention that whatever changes you come up with today would come back to you on the 18th, unless they're so complicated that they can't come back on the 18th. They would come back on the 18th, and the intention would be we would pass a complete finalized capital as modified today and operating per whatever you asked for today, and pass the whole thing on the 18th. Okay? So Diane, what would you like to highlight in 8.5E?
Just as a summary, so between the capital and operating budgets that presented, we would see an increase of 8.15% of the tax levy, which is $10,351,167 that's needed from taxes to be able to fund the operations of the municipality. As you can see in this report, we have also in Table A listed the tax rates over the last 5 years, and where those increases have either increased over the few years or we even showed a decrease. And that's based on also the assessment growth over the last few years too. With the assessment that growth expected in 2023, we're actually seeing the overall tax rate to come in at 6.72% based on the budget that's presented to you today. As we go through, and also in Table B, based on that tax rate, we're showing what the taxes would be for a residential and a farm. So the residential would see an increase of $185 for the year, and that is just the municipality of Zorra's, the township's portion, okay? It does not include the upper tier nor education at this time. And farm would see an increase of $122, okay? As we go through this report, each department will have before it a recap of the activity within their department, along with a summary of the activity and then a detailed listing. So I'll be asking the department managers to speak on their department, and they will be speaking to you with all the activity that they are projecting in their report, but will not be going through it as line by line. So we're looking at it as an overall view of the department, and they'll be pointing out any significant changes that they see or what they're proposing within staffing, if there's any kind of special maintenance projects, that kind of stuff that's covered under operating. Okay. So the first report we have is our executive summary. This is the overall operations of the municipality. So the top half is your operating and in the various departments. And then we have our capital in here also. And that's where we get our total at the bottom of what we're requesting. Okay? And then the next slide is the summary. So this is the summary within the various categories of all the departments. And each department will see a summary like this. So you'll be able to see what is the total wages, what is the total benefits within departments, what's the program expense is expenses relating to their department. So that could be anywhere from meetings, training, program costs, like in recreation, they'll have specific program costs that are needed to run their programs, where in other departments it's more of their training, their meals, if they go to a conference, that kind of stuff. Okay? If we don't have any questions here, we can go right into, okay.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, before we get too far, then, I just want to confirm something in the initial part of your report, and
Okay.
it ties in with the really good report you had last month about how tax levy is calculated. And this is complicated because I've had people say to me, well, when they reassess my property and everybody's property value goes up, you guys are going to have so much money you won't know what to do with it. And I've tried to explain to them, well, that's not how it works. We decide how much money we need, and then it filters down from there. And just because everybody's property's gone up 100% since the last evaluation or whatever it has, doesn't mean that the township's going to get twice as much money out of you. It's a very complicated process there. So I just want to confirm with you these numbers that you came up with. So the difference between the budget increase of 8.15% and the tax rate increase of 6.72%, that's only because of the assessment change.
That's correct.
That's correct, okay. And then the second question, The increased assessment is due solely to the new construction and renovation since Impact hasn't done a reassessment of all properties since 2016. Am I right there?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's good. So that means the efforts that we've done to encourage growth and the efforts of residents to build new houses and expand their facilities of that is a benefit to all the residents of the township because it's kept the overall taxing bills reduced because of this rather complicated process and all these digited numbers in there.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to, right off the top, I wanted to, especially for the 100 people that watch us, it's taken me a long time to figure this out, so I just wanted to clarify that. So before we go any deeper into this, thanks.
Anybody else before we go on to the first department? Okay.
So I will start off the general government for council operations portion. And I just wanted to note the change regarding the election budget. We're now looking at doing an annual transfer to reserve of $5,000. Previously, it's always just been, we put a large chunk in the year of the election. So that is a change moving forward. And then I also just wanted to note on the next page, just an error in the one, sorry, just keep going down a little bit. Oh, sorry, next one. Right there for the wages for council for 2021, it says 10,000, and it should be 101,000. So I just wanted to make that note.
Questions for Karen on that portion of this report? Not seeing any.
Okay, for general government, there's a significant increase and it's 14%. And this is mainly due to the increase in wages. The projected cost of insurance is 15%. And staff is looking at going out and doing an RFP so that we're hoping that we actually will maintain, if not get a lesser value than what's proposed right now. But we can't, right now, we don't have that crystal ball, so we're projecting a 15% based on what we have received as an estimate from the insurance company. Okay, so as stated in here, we have an RFP going out in the next couple of weeks. Also, as we are implementing software uses, there's always a fee for that, and so you'll see in licenses and permits, there's an increase to use those softwares that are being put into place. Also, another large increase in here is the position for the asset management, which is a shared position with 4 municipalities. So our share for that will be close to $25,000. Okay. Included in this budget is the continued transfer to reserves, $10,000 for computers, that as we go forward, if we don't need the full $10,000, we'll just take out what we need through the year, and then we can let that grow, because as we know, software packages always have to be updated, and so if we have a reserve for that, then we don't have to go and look at a large increase every 4 years. All depends on the software at that time and what the renewal package is. And that's all I have for that.
Questions from council? Councilor Stewart?
Yeah, Diane, just to confirm the insurance increase, you said that you're assuming a 14% increase, but you're going to go out for RFP in hopes that you can get far less, and it could be no increase whatsoever.
That's correct. I think the best case scenario would be less than even no increase, but we'll be happy if it just stays status quo.
You're very brave to say that out loud. Any other questions for Diane on this section of the report? Okay. Sorry, Councilor
Just
Mitchell.
to follow on, but how much competition is there out there for insurance? Because I think last time we talked the insurance, that there was like one company basically that was doing municipalities, and so how successful? Like, you're optimistic, but less so than I think you, Marcus and I.
Well, it depends on also how long we are setting the RFP out for. If it's a longer period of time that we're offering it out, because of the work involvement, we'll get more of a response. And that's why we're starting now, and our CAO is working on that right now. And we're hoping that we'll have results by the 1st of March to be it. Mhm.
Anything else on that section of the report? So apparently I'm told that supper is here now. So I'm going to suggest we break now. We've still got a bunch left to do, so I think we break now. How long do we want to break for? Like it's 20 to 6 right now. Half hour? Back in here at 10 past 6? Okay. All right. call the meeting back to order at 6:11, and we will pick up where we left off partway through item 8.5E, Report 2022-218 from the Director of Finance regarding the 2022 operating budget. Diane.
Okay, I believe we're finished general government, and we're going on to fire services. So if the chief could speak to this.
So a pretty significant increase in fire. I was hoping if you were going to leave one out, maybe this one would slip through, but yeah, pretty significant increase. And I think Diane's kind of highlighted some of those big items and broken down the department. There's a diagram of sort of the makeup of our department there as well. A couple big things, obviously a wage increase across 63 employees is going to have a pretty good hit. We've also included the proposed wage increase for the deputy district chiefs into this calculation as well, looking at aligning that wage a little bit closer with the district chief rather than the captain where it's currently sitting. We've also got the FPO position included in there, so that's we had a half fund this year and then it'll be fully funded next year. And for the first time, the fire admin support is actually coming out of the fire budget. So that support's been available to the fire chief. It's just never actually been shown in the operating budget. So that's another significant piece that contributes to that increase that's shown. In terms of where we're sitting in our operating and some of those higher level details, at present we're pulling an annual payroll. So you'll see our actuals aren't all up to date. Payroll went out this week, so we'll see that more reflective, and Dan and I are making changes to have a more accurate representation of that throughout the year so that we're not sitting where we are right now and kind of doing our best guess as our municipality grows and our call volume increases. Other than that, we had our vehicle services and annual safeties, those were completed in November, so that's the other big one that we're going to see coming in. Just where some of these things land, we don't have all of our bills in yet to start predicting, but this is sort of continuing on trend with a few new additions. As our staff grows, we're increasing some Fire Pro licenses and some software to help with the FPO and those pieces. And then a little bit of an increase in our uniform budget would be another one after having an event in which all our firefighters needed to be fully dressed. I'd like to make sure we're a little more proactive in that and making sure we get those pieces cleaned up and making sure that everyone has what they need. So a bit of an increase to get caught up on those items. Any questions?
Questions from council on this section of the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Just one that came to mind, and I didn't ask. Who's responding at? Is that an annual fee, $4,500, or is that a one-time cost? It's under it'd be page 15 of the budget.
Yeah, so subscriptions encompasses licenses like Fire Pro or iPad data. The Who's Responding fee, the Who's Responding app's actually less than $1,000 annually.
Okay, so it's just a portion.
It's a small portion that's bundled into that general topic there.
But it is an annual.
There's an annual fee
cost to it.
shared with Southwest Oxford and Norwich at this time.
That's a very valuable piece of technology.
Anyone else on this section of the report? So just to clarify something, I think the admin support one that's now in this, so that 50% story of the admin support that's in here now came out of another department, which department?
That's correct. It was out of general government.
Okay, thank you. So it's not, so it shows up here as an add of 50%, but it's not an add of 50%. This is an properly accounting really for where the work has been done actually for years.
That's correct. It's just allocating it across the proper departments.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions on this section of the report? Okay.
So we have the building department next. Right now we're projecting We have conducted a fees study, a bylaw that was updated in 2022, so our fees will increase, but right now at this time, we have set 200,000 as a permits being received in as revenue. Any additional revenues that will come in just will offset against the transfer from reserves. So within the building department expenses, we're actually looking at, we know there's 2 full-time staff plus an admin staff. And the admin staff is 75% of a 30-hour work week. That's allocated there, and the rest, yes, 70%, yes. And 30% is general government. So their wages just split 70-30. They're also looking at, they've installed a software called iCloud Permitting, so that's an online permit system so that residents can now set up their account and actually apply for their permits online and submit their drawings electronically. And we're working through now purchasing 2 tablets so that they'll be able to go out when they're doing inspections and do the permit inspections right then and there. And then when they come back to the office, it'll be uploaded onto the account. So that's part of this budget also. We're looking at right now a transfer from reserves of $77,393 to cover the overall building expenses to be able to have a zero tax requirement. And also from reserves will be $55,000 for a new pickup truck that's been scheduled in the capital budget. We're expecting that there will not be a need for a full $77,000 with the new updated fees bylaw. This should reduce it significantly with all the building that's going on. And we're seeing a large surplus for 2022 that will be going into reserves. Okay? Is there any questions on building?
Questions from council? So the 209,000 then, that's going to go into reserves, can really then only be used for, in this reserve, can only be used for building expenses.
That's correct.
Operational or capital, but
That's correct.
building services. So, like, where do we forecast the need for like $209,000? Like over the next,
So the idea is that if there's a low year, you'll be able to take those funds and
pay the cost of
That's
delivering building
right.
services.
right now we've had fortunate to have a number of years with a large number of permits. And so we haven't had the need to really take funds from the reserve, but we don't know when there's a rainy day that comes forward.
So are you able to forecast that out and make approximations as to, how rainy is it going to be kind of thing, basically, right? Like, so in other words, then how much of a reserve is a reasonable reserve to have for the future in there? Are you able to make like a rough approximation of that? Like 209,000 seems reasonable to me, I guess, at this point. But I'm just saying, like, say it gets up to like 600,000. Like, at what point do we say, like, it's never going to rain that much? Like,
And we also need to take a look at the building department a little bit further, because there's a lot of services that they need from the municipality that they're not paying for. So we need to take a look at a further financial contribution from the building to help fund their share of electricity, insurance, all that kind of stuff for the building they're in.
Okay.
So that'll be part of it too, going forward.
Depending on how the changes to the Conservation Act pan out, there may be some things, maybe more impact on planning than building. We may have some costs that now the Upper Thames provides for us that would come more under our municipal responsibility, and that's yet to be seen how that all works out. But I don't know where that comes into building planning, or but some of the things that we rely on Upper Thames for advice on, we may have to end up paying for ourselves at some point.
Anyone else? Okay.
Okay, we're down to bylaw.
So, as everyone is aware, new process in place for bylaw enforcement with the hiring of Dave between Zorra, Norwich, Southwest Oxford, and Blandford Blenheim. And also the use of the Humane Society for our animal control. So that is captured within this portion, as well as some funds for use of our fence viewers and stock valuers.
Questions from council? Councillor Mitchell.
Did I see in there that our policing contract is actually less than
Yes.
what it's been, which is good news, but that's just a calculation that the OPP does on service delivery and sends us on an annual basis of what they're going to charge us for the next year.
That's correct. And because we have more growth in our property counts, that has helped dispersing it across the per household.
Okay. And that's how they calculate it, is on a per household basis. And that's needing, it's not that we're getting less service, it's just being spread out.
And that's
Oh.
correct. And also, it's based on overtime. If there's any large
Right.
investigations or anything like that, you
Okay.
may be, and we may not have had that in the prior year, so.
Okay.
It's a formula, isn't it, of base and then a demand for service sort of model, right?
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know there are some residents that think we need more policing, and if we're happy to see that. It appears that we're cutting back, but we're not. It's just the way the formula works out.
Anyone else on this section of the report? Okay.
Okay, if we'll move on to health services. And this is made up our health and safety, also our medical buildings and services and cemeteries. So health and safety, we understand that there's a need for some extra dollars to go in and fund this area. And so we're looking at more training for staff to meet the regulations within the health and safety guidelines. And then in health services, there's a minimal increase, and this is just within a slight increases in the wages. And then our cemeteries, there's quite a number of grant requests also. There's the projection of 15% increase in the insurance also within this budget. And that's where you'll see most of the increase for our cemeteries.
Questions from council? Okay.
So we'll go down to recreation. Matt?
And double tasking, or a few things to kind of note for the year. I'm going to kind of skip down to some of our operating items. So there's an outline here just of some of kind of our staffing levels outside of a inclusion of a new parks attendant position inside the for the summer operations. The staffing levels are staying the same outside of the increase in cost of living increases. We have another item that to draw attention to is that we have, as we're moving or transitioning away from the old fire station on 19th, that we are looking to lease a building for summer parks operations. That's included in this budget as well. And then in addition to that, we've got the grants for the beach field, or the cost share with the Beachfield Museum and the operating grants for, or the grants for, these are the community organizations inside there.
Questions from council? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, man, I want to focus in on what you just said about the rental of that building. Is that for a year round, or is that just for a seasonal, for the 25,000?
That's a year-round lease. For 2023, though, we're only, the 25,000 is actually including for 10 months use. We have made temporary arrangements for the storage of the equipment for this winter. So we would start up our storage there in March, so we can be operational with that equipment in March and April through the remainder of the year. I haven't found a space that would lease to us on a seasonal basis, a space that's suitable for us. And this is a space inside the town of Thamesford to allow to minimize transportation of equipment and make operations a bit easier.
So the follow up on that, so the equipment, are we looking for this primarily the summertime equipment or the wintertime equipment as well, or
so
for the storage?
The equipment that we'd be looking to store in here is primarily parks operation equipment summer.
Okay.
Now, so for this, we've got a compact tractor with so there's two compact tractors. One set is more for turf maintenance, so it has a mower attachment, roller and aerator attachments as well, and the storage for those implements. There's another compact tractor that gets used for ball diamond grooming, so it has a couple other implements for that one, for the diamond groomer specifically. And then there's also our more hand or power equipment, chainsaws, trimmers, all those sorts of things. And then we have our two trailers that we'd be looking to store. They may not fit inside, so we may be they might be stored on site outside. And then winter operations, though, I've talked to Steve about this, if this was available. They're currently for this winter moving the sidewalk plow for Thamesford between the Kintor shop and Thamesford, so that they could utilize this space as well for their winter plowing or sidewalk plowing operations.
Okay. So this equipment is used pretty well 5 days a week from what, May, April to October?
Typical park operation season, we start late March, right through the end of September. We groom diamonds 7 days a week through April through September. There's a bit of a slowdown in September as we get towards more of the adult leagues and going on, but not the minor baseball functions. But so it would be so late March to September, 7 days a week for utilization for that. And then also if it was located in Thamesford, Public Works would utilize it for snow clearing operations for the sidewalks as well. Yeah, that was it for on that topic, but so yeah, I went through and all the various revenue sources. You're looking at an increase of about $160,000 over what was budgeted for 2022. So is that anticipated because of, you anticipate that the COVID restrictions will be fully lifted, or are there other factors? That's a fairly significant increase in revenue. Yeah. I went through and parsed through this pretty carefully because I don't want to promise revenues which I don't actually intend to or expect to receive. So we're going back to pre-pandemic levels. So in the last year, we knew going into our budget season, because we were doing operating budget beyond January, when we already had shutdowns for more than a month in that year, we knew were going to happen. So we look at both arenas being shut down for 1 month is approximately $50,000 in ice revenue in our peak season. So we have that. The hall revenues are up significantly. We're fielding a lot of calls for stag and does, weddings, and although in the actual on this budget presentation. It doesn't show that accurately our revenues that we've received so far, because there's a process of receiving them from the groups and kind of allocating them into the ledgers. Our booking software, Amelia, allows us to pull reports of months or of purchases received by month or any certain date. So I looked at both the calendar year, specific months, specific weeks to try and extrapolate out a good estimate for next year. So where we used to, before pre-pandemic, used to see about $190,000 of ICE revenue. The last couple of years we've been in 150 or even as low as $110,000 of ICE revenue per arena. So now increasing back up to those pre-pandemic levels. And then the increase of the hall revenue, which although we have seen good hall usage over the last couple of years, it hasn't been ones that generate significant revenue. Significant revenue comes more from our stag and does, weddings, and large functions where we have a $1,000 rental instead of a $50 group coming in. So we're seeing a large upswing in those, and it's reflective of in what we're seeing booking and what I've been pulling reports-wise from our booking software.
So that leads right in, because a big significant part of that increase is $134,000 for ICE rental. So that's an anticipated return to the pre-COVID levels. That doesn't necessitate renting ICE to other individuals or groups to reach that.
We always do see outside, like we do through our ICE allocation policy, put our residents first, but we're already seeing usage by outside groups. We have both regional teams or Ingersoll, minor hockey, they're playing out of our group or in our facilities. So when I looked back to 2020 for Thamesford, our 2018 actual was $180,000 for the Thamesford Arena's ICE rental. In 2020, we were forecasted $190,000. Well, things changed quickly that year, and not that we saw it coming. So, and since then we've had dramatically reduced ICE revenues because of that. And so for both arenas, we're looking to get back to those levels. And the reports I'm pulling and looking at, okay, how many hours of ICE do we book in a week? When I multiply that out over the 26-week ICE operation season, it adds up into the forecasted numbers that we're presenting.
Yeah, certainly a huge challenge to budget that based on what's happened on almost 3 years now, where your department got savaged by the COVID, and so yeah, if you're comfortable that those revenues are attainable with just primarily with the return to what we were doing before, then that's good. But that is a huge increase in what you've been budgeting. So.
So I have a series of questions in relation to the new for 2023 seasonal park attendant. So my questions are, so it's 40 hours a week for 5 weeks. Has there been any consideration for this to be a student employment opportunity?
So it's 40 hours a week for 5 months. No,
did I say 5 weeks?
Yeah, that's fine.
My apologies. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So we will apply for the grants available that we have in the past for student summer employment. We will see where their kind of priorities are this year. The last year we weren't successful with our summer student grants or Canada Summer Jobs grant application for both camp, pool, or any other jobs. They have changed over previous years their priorities of where they're trying to focus those funds, and last year it didn't quite line up with our more youth-based program. So hopefully we can see that return for us. The ideal student or the ideal person for this in my mind would be somebody that is looking to get into the horticultural industry, potentially like somebody that's going through school for landscaping or landscape design, something like that. That's kind of my ideal applicant. So hopefully we are able to offer a job to a local resident that's interested in these fields.
Okay, and then so it in the report it says that there's a new position, but then there's no dollar value assigned to that change. So how does that work into the wage line item? What's the dollar value attributed to this role?
It's approximately $14,000 to $17,000. Depends a little bit on where the person starts on their wage grade based upon the experience, and then also if we were to get an applicant that I think is the best suitable applicant, but they can't potentially start till May because they have school, and like 17,000 includes an April start date. That we could definitely use somebody through April, but if it's the right candidate, we would wait to May, and then we would have kind of more at that $14,000 mark.
And then is this addition to the staffing level to achieve a different or a new level of service for our parks for the season, or is this to accommodate a workflow that's not attainable with our current staffing levels?
I would actually say it's a bit of both. I think our desired service level where we want to be with more attention paid to gardens, trails, tree watering, and kind of our regular cleaning and maintenance of the parks is something we want to improve upon. And it's difficult to continue to maintain that with our current full-time staff in the summer for operations staff, especially considering that our 3 full-time staff do have vacation time. They're senior staff with us. They have a significant amount of vacation time we have to accommodate. This would very much help us improve our current standard level, and then look to improve a bit with service in specifically kind of the gardens and weeding and tree watering, some of those kind of more beautification projects.
Anyone else? Okay. Yeah, no, I'm good. Sorry. Go ahead.
There's no other questions. We'll go on then to
Okay.
Yeah, so some significant raising in prices here with contracted services is one, contributing to fuel prices, and same with equipment and supplies. It's, we're seeing a huge increase in fuel, calcium, or dust suppressant application, again, up 1 point, so over 3.6 million liters per year. That is a significant increase. That's pretty much is self-explanatory here. I guess I'm open for questions.
Questions from council? Councilor Mitchell.
2 questions, Steve. One is on page 46. It talks about the reserve policy for rehabilitate or purchase a future gravel pit, and it says it's $39,600 based on a calculation of $1 per ton. Now, it's per ton of gravel
That's correct.
out of the Robinson pit?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's how we're figuring it.
That's
For
right.
every ton of gravel we take out, we're going to put in $1 towards future.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
and this is a brand new reserve, or is this
This,
something that
this
we've been
additional
working with?
dollar is a brand new reserve.
Okay.
Correct?
There already is a reserve for,
Yes, we put money back. We put everything back except like the cost of crushing. Obviously goes back to the cost, goes towards the projects for the gravel, and the cost of the gravel coming, the calculation of the cost of the gravel, like the raw gravel coming out of the pit. So whatever gravel it takes to make that crushed A, and whatever gravel is used for construction projects that is like right out of the bank, like pit run gravel, is calculated about 98 cents a ton.
Okay.
So that on top of the crushing fees is what it's calculated to be. And I think I put an extra on top of that, an extra $1 on top of that. So now we're adding an extra $1 on that to the gravel
Okay.
cost to put back into reserves.
okay. And my other question was, your wage increase is only 3.13%, which is below the 6.7 cost of living staff is getting. So I'm glad to see that, but how are you doing it?
Well, we've had a couple new hires, and they started at a lower pay scale. Over time, we'll catch up to that higher rate, but at the current rate they're at right now, that's what makes a difference.
Okay, so we're giving up some experience, but saving a little money in the process, and that's,
We always do when we have retirees,
yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yep. No, that's a good explanation, because that number, wages is a significant number in your department, and for it to be half of the cost of living, that was a significant number of dollars, so
Yeah.
but that makes sense. Thanks.
Anyone else on this section of the report? Okay.
Okay, we're down to planning.
Okay, so we are projecting a bit of a decrease in planning application revenues, and then we added a bit of an increase in our legal fees for sale of land. And in economic development, a bit of an increase there for the permanent employment costs of the Rural Economic Development Corporation staff.
Questions from council? Not seeing any. One question I have, do we know, have we heard from ROEDC yet? They come in once a year and give us an update. I can't remember when the last one that we had, but it should be soonish. shouldn't it?
They're coming in the new year.
Thank you. Anyone else on this before we move on? Okay.
Okay, we'll go on to drainage. Drainage is just seeing an increase based on also the wages and benefits. Any debentures from drains are collected through taxation, so that's an offset. Where we're going to see the increase is the storm management system for the settlement areas of Embro and Chelmsford. And then we're also setting up a write-off account for drains. So instead of billing everybody for $2, $3, $4, we're actually going to cap it. So anything $5 and under, we would just write that off. And that basically is just saving on postage, efficiencies through staff time, and eliminates that. So that's part of the drainage part.
Questions from council? Councilor Mitchell?
Okay, just clarification, because a few months ago, we talked about putting money in reserve for the municipal drainage. Is this what we're talking about, that program, or is this something different?
That's correct. That's what it
Okay.
is. So this is the consulting fees right now that we're
Okay.
still incurring in 2023.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. The plan was that only people in the service villages would be paying an extra fee for that. Is that kicking in this year, or are we still in the planning stage for this, and that fee doesn't kick in for?
We're in the process of setting up a bylaw
Okay.
and working through that. Those steps, they should be all in place for the final tax installment in July.
Okay, so a portion of this extra cost will be paid through that extra charge to municipal residents? Okay.
Yes. And just as a side note, there is a portion in the roads department that also captures what the costs are to the roads for the system going under the roads. So they've had to incorporate that extra additional cost. And I believe that was $17,000 that the roads have to absorb on a annual basis.
Anyone else on this section of the report? Okay.
So our last department is just general government other revenues. Here we're looking at an increase in Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. So we're increased by $57,100. We're looking at an increase in marriage licenses, interest on outstanding taxes, which is great, but we're also working towards trying to collect those taxes because that's our cash flow. So we may see it for another year, but we'll be aggressive in starting to hone in on those outstanding AR invoices or taxes. Right now, we projected a slowdown in housing sales, so our tax certificates, we're looking at a decrease in there. That's about it. If there's any other questions?
Questions from council? No.
Okay, so that's your 2023 operating budget that's come before you. I don't know if there's any other general questions or comments that council wants to provide us.
I guess just a question of clarity from me just before we go any further. So we're looking at right now, I think, an 8.15% tax levy increase and a 6.72% tax rate increase.
Correct.
As presented in the draft, that's combined draft capital and operational. Does that include the changes the council made today to the draft capital or not?
No.
No. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Questions from council? Not seeing any. Okay. I have two motions here then. I didn't get them in any specific order, so. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Stewart, that the allocation of $25,000 to lease a 1,400 square foot shop in Thamesford to store and maintain recreation department equipment be removed from the 2023 operating budget. Councillor Mitchell, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, this is a battle I've fought before, but I just can't support spending $25,000 to rent I think it's 1,400 square foot shop for 10 months when we have excess space. Not as convenient, but we do, when the ZMF gets done and our public works moves into the new facilities, there will be some excess space, certainly 1,400 square feet in Kintor. Recreation does have a float trailer. It's 11 kilometers from the arena, Thamesford Community Center, to the ZMF Center. I realize that there would be some staff time and some fuel and inconvenience in ferrying stuff back and forth, but I don't think it's going to come anywhere close to $25,000, and I think we should look at some other options rather than renting that building. Obviously, my first choice is the ZMF, but there's also some empty space at the Thamesford Fire Hall. There's 6 bays and only 3 trucks, and I know we're getting a trailer that will take up another one of those bays, but there's still enough room to fit in a couple of tractors and their attachments. And if I can steal an idea from Kevin that he may want to expand on, is the possibility of using the Scout Hall for this storage. It is apparently our property, and it's an underutilized piece of property, and the report last month said that our facilities at the BD room or at the community center would be quite suitable for the Scouts. So I've never been in the Scout Hall, so I don't know if it's just a matter of knocking out a wall and putting in a bigger door or what, but I think if the option is $25,000 for 10 months rental, I think we need to pull that out and look at some other options that are lower cost.
Councillor Stewart is the secondary. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I think we can acknowledge there's an inconvenience factor with the proposed ZMF solution, but I just would like to look into this a little further, and that's the reason I seconded this. Like Paul said, that option that does potentially exist here, and I know it depends on some future negotiations or just general conversations with the scout groups, but that could be a very viable solution that is in a great location for its intended purpose, and I think just before we commit to that $25,000, we should go down that road. We do have other options available in the short term, like ZMF, so I think that's why this was a great idea.
Anyone else? Couple questions from me. So the proposed $25,000 a year to lease this, is this a 1 year or perpetual or until there's a bigger solution, or like how big of a commitment is this?
It would be until there's a better solution. The commitment would be, I don't have a lease in front of me on it, so I was presented with the opportunity on it. And so I'd imagine out of a typical lease, we would be committing for a year, and then at that point we would be required to provide 1 month notice or something along those lines for a standard commercial lease. But
And question, Diane, $25,000 is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 0.2% of tax levy?
Correct.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I put my hand up just because I wasn't ready to proceed, but I hadn't quite gathered my thoughts. Quick question for fire department. Paul had mentioned about potentially there being some vacant space at fire department, at fire hall for a couple of tractors. So some of the equipment that's being stored is seasonal. Some of the stuff is more efficient to be more local during certain season times. Have staff explored any opportunity, or are they able to on the spot comment to whether or not there's any potential in that being something that we could consider in the short term? Is that possible?
We have a 6-bay fire station. Is it ideal to store things there? No. The design of it's a drive-through bay, and we've got a 4th truck parked there and a trailer coming. I wouldn't like to see it as a permanent solution by any means.
If I may, I have concerns with the use of the old couture shop as well. We have to keep in mind that 46 Commissioner Street will not for very long be Zorra Township. Right, currently that building is full of equipment. It's full of sign inventory and tire inventory, among other attachments. That is all expected to go into the old contour shop once we get moved into the new ZMF. I'm concerned for a permanent solution. We could probably accommodate short term, but for a permanent solution, I don't think that would be a good avenue to go at this time.
Councilor Mitchell.
And to clarify, I'm not suggesting that transporting to ZMF is a permanent solution. I think if the solution for 2023 is $25,000 rental, or doing something that's less convenient for this year, considering the budget increase, and I know 25,000 in compared to the millions of dollars is a small number, but it's $25,000. It's more than any of us make. So.
Within this budget is a space allocation review for the grounds at Thamesford Recreation Center. And one of the things we were going to look at was the potential of hosting a new 1,400 square foot structure on that site. But again, that's going to be determined on what that study shows for space allocation.
Anyone else? So I was scrambling here to look at the procedural bylaw and see if I have to give up the chair every time I want to speak to something, and I can't find it. So I'm gonna, with your, yeah, so it's going to be short. Thank you. So to me, I guess my starting point is I trust that staff have looked at these things and have worked out what space they need, is my starting point for this. $25,000 a year is 0.2% of budget. It's not nothing. It's still $25,000. But I hear from residents, the things I hear from residents most often about is their road, and the second thing is recreation. And what I always hear from them about is recreation is they want more and better recreation. And time and again, we allocate resources to recreation, and I literally hear back from residents about how it is better now, and they like that better now. I never hear that from them about the roads, no matter how hard we work on the roads, no matter how much better they are. Nobody ever phones me the next year and says, you know what, that's better now. But I do hear that about recreation. To me, this is $25,000 that I'm not going to pretend that our residents are going to say it's a great thing you rented that shop for that equipment. They're not going to know that, but I do think they're going to notice the difference in the delivery of the recreation service. So for that reason, I'm not going to support this. Anybody else want to speak to this before I read the motion and call the question? Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Stewart, that the allocation of $25,000 to lease a 1,400 square foot shop in Thamesford to store and maintain recreation department equipment be removed from the 2023 operating budget. Those in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. And the next motion that I have is moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that report 2022-218 from the Director of Finance be received and filed, and that the new seasonal park attendant position be removed from the 2023 operating budget. Deputy Mayor Grigg, do you want to speak to that?
So my challenge with this is knowing that exactly what Mayor Ryan just spoke to, that what I hear from the most is recreation. the complaints about recreation and then the thank yous for the improved level of service and the solutions that come forward and the opportunities provided. So this is, I'm really conflicted on this one because I really believe that that there are changes that need to happen, and those changes likely include staffing level changes. The challenge that I have is that there's not a lot of information in an operating budget where it's put in without a dollar value, without what the intended purpose of it is. And traditionally, whether it's right or wrong, traditionally we have a little bit more of a separate opportunity to review when we're changing a staffing level, because that change to staffing level does have an impact on the budget. The financial impact isn't actually as high as I was anticipating when I drafted this motion. It's a little bit more palatable. And I couldn't help but think about where I was going to go with this motion when I was thinking about the last motion, because I think both of these they're definitely, they impact each other, right? Do we have enough time to be trailering things around? Well, only if we maybe have a little bit more staff time. And are we paying more money for storage? And if we do we need more staff? So I brought this forward because I just struggle with adding it without having council consider it in the big picture of what this means for recreation. Having said that, I have things for the strategic plan that are going to probably result in making recommendations for this exact thing. I'd love to hear from council. I think this is an important discussion for us to have, and I'd like to hear from council their position on this. At this point, I'm not really sure where I stand on my own motion, and I'll leave it at that.
Councilor Mitchell.
I know where I stand on your motion, and I said at last council meeting that I'm opposed to hiring more staff at this time. I did make an exception for the asset management coordinator because of the dollars involved and the potential benefits of that position, but given the financial position, and sure, once again, it's not a huge percentage, but 14,000 or 17,000, whatever, I'm not willing to add to staff and to add those extra costs to it. And I share Katie's concern that there's no indication of why this position is needed and what this person would actually be doing.
Anyone else?
The only clarity I got from your preamble before about the position when you were asking some questions was the vacation coverage of the senior staff that you have, more senior staff that takes more time off. Can you elaborate on that, just to understand? For me, that speaks to me as a void to fill and maintain some continuity of service, but what kind of time are we talking that covers?
Well, in between the three staff, we're looking at 12 weeks vacation for those operation staff. They don't take it all in the summer, but if they take it in the winter, we have to cover the arena. If they have a shift, which the arena's scheduled to be open, we have to cover that with a part-time staff. We do that, and that comes inside our part-time staffing budget for the arena operations. When they take it in the summer, we don't cover their vacation the same way. We don't, if we have them if they go off, we don't have a part-time staff person that takes over that shift that they would have been serving. So if we do our best to rotate the staffing schedule so that they're not multiples off at once, but there's times where we may have two operators off for a short period of time, leaving one behind, and our facilities supervisor to conduct the day-to-day operations of the entire parks department. So it leaves us tight, but we also do recognize that for those staff, they do want to take some time off during the summer. We rotate as best as possible, but there's an issue or a challenge with that. And I guess if I would add one note to that as well is that this staff, and I think it came through last time we asked for this staff person, was this to allow the staff not to work weekends. And yes, this person would work weekends so that our full-time staff may not be, but I also think that's because our full-time staff are best utilized for the more detail-orientated and difficult repairs, which can't be conducted on a weekend when the parks are busy or in operation. So if we have this person to be able to work those weekends, our full-time staff or permanent full-time staff, I should say, aren't working that Saturday shift and then taking off Wednesday. So now they're there Wednesday to take care of that repair or maintenance task that gets delayed.
Anyone else? I think the upper number that you said, Matt, was 17,000?
Approximately, yeah.
Approximately 17,000? And Diane, that would be, correct me if I'm wrong, but about 0.15%-ish of tax levy? Okay. So, I mean, to me, same thing again. Like, I don't want to add 17,000 to this, but based on feedback I get from residents, they call me, they email me, they contact me about recreation services, and they want better. And when we give recreation more resources to do that, I literally get the calls back from the same residents saying, this is better. Or frankly, I've had residents approach me out of the blue about stuff and tell me about things several times that I didn't even know we had done differently. But residents came to me and said, hey, that thing was done, thanks a lot. And I'm like, I didn't even know that was happening. So to me, this is a service that residents want and they want more of. And what I've seen is when we allocate more to it, they get more of it. And I think that's our job, is to deliver the services that they want. So to me, 17,000, 0.15%, put that together with the previous 25,000 for the rental of the shop, you're looking at 42,000 and a total of 0.35% on the tax rate. I think for a service that people want and contact their council about, I'm pretty confident that I could go out to people and say, are you all willing to pay 0.35% more for this? And I think all of them would tell me, yes, I want to pay 0.35% more for recreation services. I'm confident and comfortable with that, so I won't be supporting this as it is here. Anybody else before I read it again and call the question? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that report 2022-218 from the Director of Finance be received and filed, and that the new seasonal park attendant position be removed from the 2023 operating budget. All those in favor? Opposed? That's defeated. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that report 2022-218 from the Director of Finance be received and filed for information purposes only. As the mover, Deputy Mayor Grigg, do you wish to speak to it? Councillor Stewart? Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And if I'm not mistaken, we have confirmatory and adjournment. Moved by Stewart, seconded by Mitchell, that bylaw 91-22, this is the one that's a little bit wet from the humidity off the chocolate milk. Moved by Stewart, seconded by Mitchell, that bylaw 91-22, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held December 21st, 2022, be read a first, second, and third time this December 21st, 2022. And further, that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that this session of council be now adjourned and herewith closed at 7:04 p.m. And the next meeting of council be called for January 18th, 2022 at 9:30 a.m. in the council chambers of the Township Municipal Office. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried, and we are adjourned.